Okay, welcome to Level 1 Science Online with Henny van Vieren. Hi, Year 11s. I guess you, like me, are all excited about this afternoon's announcement, and we all want to know when we go back to school. But in the meantime, we still need to carry on. So, without further ado, today we have to go and talk about some more inheritance. Okay, and this was a question in 2017. The question was said piebaldism. Okay, so piebald is this white patches on a black horse, and actually you can see that sometimes in humans as well. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody with a little white patch in their hair. Um, I know 2 or 3 people with this. Okay, so it's a genetic condition causing a white patch on the head and the body of horses. In horses, piebaldism is dominant. Okay, so it's the dominant trait. And the normal color, black, is recessive. So if this guy, when you look at the recessive gene over here, we can immediately say because he doesn't have a dominant trait, we know that he's going to be little h, little h. Remember, when you see a recessive phenotype, immediately we know that it is homozygous recessive. Okay. Now, this guy, on the other hand, can be piebald, in other words, capital H, or homozygous dominant, or it can be a heterozygous. In other words, it's going to be a dominant allele and a recessive allele. Because remember, whenever there's a dominant allele present, the recessive allele will be overshadowed and the dominant allele will show. Okay, so we cannot say what this horse is. Okay, so they then decided to make a pedigree chart. Okay, so the normal males and normal females. When we talk about a normal male and a normal female, they are black, black, and normal is recessive. So whenever you now see a recessive organism in here, you know that they are homozygous recessive, don't you? Yeah, because they display the recessive phenotype. So little h, little h, little h, little h, little h, little h, and so on. Now, let's look at these two. They are piebald. Well, maybe let's just read the question. From the pedigree chart above, list all the possible phenotypes and genotypes of horses 3, 8, and 9. Use the letter H for the dominant trait and little h for the recessive trait. Remember, recessive is normal, the full black one, black beauty. So, number 3. If number 3 is a piebald male, it means that he has to have a dominant gene. Do you agree? But can you tell immediately if he's dominant H, in other words, a homozygote, or would he be not? So let's look at his kids, because we can also see his mom, or the mom there, the wife, or the, I don't know, the stallion and the mare, or whatever we call them, filly, no idea. But anyways, she's also piebald. But between the two of them, 3 of their 4 offspring were normal, which means they were little h, little h. Okay? If that is the case, the mom had to give a little h, and the dad had to give a little h. Consequently, we can now say that the only way that the dad can be piebald and be able to give a little h for these guys, he has to be a heterozygous big H. Let me just get a pen here. Oh, that's interesting. There, it's gonna. So he has to be big H and little h. Okay. Now we go to number 8. Number 8 is over here. And when you look at number 8 is a normal male. Oh, that's easy. It's a normal male, in other words, full on black, not piebald, and it's the recessive trait, and it's showing the recessive trait, then we know they have to be homozygous recessive. Now number 9. Number 9 could have received a dominant trait from the dad, dominant allele from the dad. So we know, and she could have received a dominant allele from the mom. Okay, but if you look at the mom over here, remember each of them had to give a little h for these guys. So all we know at this stage for certain is that number 9 has got a dominant trait, dominant allele. We don't know if it came from the mom or the dad, and we don't know if the mom or the dad gave them a recessive allele. But when you look at the offspring between this one and that one, all their offspring are piebald, which shows you it's a high likelihood, not definite. So this one can be big H, little h, okay, and so can all of these. However, having 4 piebalds in a row shows a high likelihood, almost like a test cross, because you're crossing it with a known recessive. It's a high likelihood that this one is going to be homozygous dominant, but we cannot say for certain unless we monitor the offspring for a long time. Okay, so, and that's why they say list all possible phenotypes. It means 1 or 2 of them can actually have multiple phenotypes. Okay, does that make sense? Let's see the answer. So they just assumed immediately that it's that, but that is actually not the right answer. Anyways, so then we go to piebald number 3. A breeder wants to produce only dominant piebald offspring. So let me just quickly change this. Discard that. Animation. Okay, and we go back to Shift F5. Beautiful. Okay. So a breeder wants to produce only dominant piebald offspring from a breeding pair of horses. The breeding has piebald and normal horses to breed from. How could the breeder use crosses to make sure that the pair of horses were pure breeding? Show crosses using the Punnett square. So what you say is, this is a classical test cross. We want to see if this horse is homozygous dominant or not. Okay? In other words, this horse's genotype needs to be... Oh, that doesn't work very well, does it? Come on, give me some ink. Homozygous dominant or heterozygous. Now, to do that, we then go and say, fine, we need to cross it with a known recessive. So, how a test cross works is you take your animal that you want to test and you cross it with a known recessive. So in this case, you will cross this horse with a normal horse, and then you will monitor the offspring. If the offspring, and if the horse is homozygous dominant, it's got a 100% chance, like here, to produce an offspring that is piebald. That is for every fertilization. If this horse is a heterozygous, it's got a 50-50% chance of producing a piebald or a normal horse. But when you look at this, you know that actually 50% for every fertilization still means that you can produce a lot of piebald horses. Consequently, we need to monitor the offspring for a long time, and the longer we monitor it, the more clearly or the more sure we can be that it is a homozygous dominant. Okay. Crossing the piebald. If the piebald horse is that, none of the offspring will be black. The breeder would need to carry out many crosses to show that it was not due to chance. If a black offspring is produced, the breeder can be certain that the piebald horse was a heterozygote. The farmer should breed only with homozygous dominant males and females, as it will ensure that all the offspring are piebald. Now, this was a question that really made me angry, because how could the breeder use the crosses to make sure the pair of horses were pure breeding? Now, in the answer, they actually then insisted that for excellence you had to write The farmer should only breed with dominant males and females. That wasn't actually in the question, but you guys need to remember that. The farmer should only breed with dominant males and females, as this will ensure that all the offspring are piebald. Ideally, the breeder would breed homozygous dominant males and homozygous dominant females, as this would remove all the recessive allele, the black, from the group. Okay. Now, why do species show genetic variation? So let's think about COVID for a moment. If we were all very, very, very susceptible to COVID, what will happen to us? The human race will simply die away. But luckily there's people who are more resistant and people who are less resistant. Okay? Now, organisms of a species that reproduce sexually are not identical. Therefore, they exhibit variation. And variation or differences in traits are caused by genetic factors. What genes you are born with. The environmental factors, but only one genetic variation can be passed on to the next. We are all the same, but we are all different. Okay? We have the same set of genes. We all have the same, basically the same DNA. But the difference between that child's skin color and this child's skin color is only 12 genes. Okay? And in every one of our cells, we've got 20,600 genes. So 12 out of 20,000 is nothing. So, but the reason why this child has got a darker skin is because his family lived in Africa for a much longer time, and they had to have protection against the sun. Whereas this child, blue eyes, very light skin, most likely are from Northern European descent, where there wasn't a lot of sun, and they needed to get as much vitamin D as they could. That's why they lost their pigment. Okay. Anyways, yeah. So, inherited and environmental conditions. Look at this poor old lion. He's a real warrior. His face is full of scars. Now, if his face is full of scars, is he going to have babies with faces full of scars? No, you do not inherit scars. Those are environmental variation. You do not inherit them. It's like saying that if I become a bodybuilder like Arnold Schwarzenegger, my son or daughter will be born with bigger muscles. That's simply not the case. Okay, so inherited means my child will inherit some traits that are similar to what I have and some that are similar to what their mom have. Okay, and it's going to be a mix of the two. But other things like environmental conditions are, well, how short I cut my hair and how many scars I have and so forth and so forth. Alright, so alleles and DNA, they're inherited. It has a role on your phenotype, but through the gametes, remember the gametes are your sperm and your eggs. Gametes are sex cells, sperm and egg, and that is passed on to your offspring. The environment gives you a non-inherited variation. It does have an effect on your phenotype. If you get a tattoo, you look different, and phenotype is the physical shape. Or if you take a tree or a plant and you put it close to a window, it's going to start growing towards the window. It looks very different. But does it pass it on to the gametes? No, because the change is only in the somatic cells. It's only in the somatic cells, okay? So it does not go on to the offspring. Environmental changes, the hydrangea, okay? Hydrangeas are beautiful and they're coming back into favor again. But the interesting thing is they like the soil a little bit acidic. But if the soil is a pH of 5.5, more aluminium in the soil is available and it turns into these beautiful blue. But if you want to keep them pink, then actually you add a little bit of alkaline or base into it, And when it gets to about 6.5, the flowers go pink. Same flower bush. You're not even changing the different ones. The same bush will actually then grow different colored depending on what is available at the roots. Incredible. So, 2014, inheritable and non-inheritable variation in plants. Variation within a species can be inheritable or non-inheritable. Okay, so it tells us, give 2 examples of the environmental factors that can lead to non-inheritable variation in plants. Okay, so water, light, nutrients, wind, disease, pest, and link them to how they can affect the phenotype. Okay, I want to show you a quick picture of some trees that I recently showed my year 12s. And windswept trees, New Zealand. Check out these trees. Okay, they grow this way. The wind is not currently blowing, but it's blown in that direction so frequently that the tree is actually growing in that direction. That's not part of their DNA. Okay, it's definitely not part of their DNA, but because it's being pushed in that direction all the time, it has that effect on the phenotype. There's some other examples in here too. Look at that one. Here's another one. And here's another. Again, I find it really interesting. So, environmental effects on trees, on living organisms. Okay, go back to the presentation and click there, Shift 5. Alrighty, so here we have, I believe this is, remember that I thought it was tobacco plants, but the photographs below show a large number of plants that are all the same species. The yellow-brown color in some of the plants has been caused by a disease. The disease is present throughout the field but only affects some plants. This is because of variation in the plants. Explain why variation means not all plants get the disease. There is variation in the plants shown in the photograph because the plants have different alleles, DNA and genes. Some alleles or DNA and gene result in the plant having resistance to the disease, but other alleles, DNA or genes, result in the plant that is affected by the disease. And that's your answer for merit. We have more resistance over there and not over here because they have different alleles. That's all. Okay, Venus flytrap. Some Venus flytrap has this amazing red on the inside and some do not. Okay, this one is called the B52 with the red leaf. A teacher brought 2 identical plants to the class and put them in different parts of the classroom. The Venus flytrap near a window grew short leaves, and the Venus flytrap in the shade grew long leaves. Interesting. Color variation in the leaves of the Venus flytrap can be passed on to the offspring, but the different leaf lengths cannot. Explain why. In your answer, you should define inheritable and non-inheritable variation and explain what causes inheritable and non-inheritable variation. So your answer is going to be inheritable variation can be passed on to the offspring. It involves a change, a mutation in the information, the DNA, also the nucleotide sequence, please. Whereas non-inheritable variation may be due to an environment, and so only affects the body cells, the somatic cells, and only that organism, not its offspring. So, when there's less light, the plant needs to photosynthesize more. Therefore, they make bigger leaves. If they have a lot of light, they don't need long leaves. So the lack of light has caused the flytrap in the shade to grow longer leaves. This is due to a change in the DNA, and so, sorry, this is not due to a change in the DNA, and so cannot be passed on. The red coloration, however, it was a mutation, and that is passed on as long as the DNA in the gametes is also affected. So as long as the DNA in your sex cells, your gametes, your sperm and egg, if they are not affected by this, then it won't. So you can get a plant that develops a tumor, or an animal that develops a tumor, but that does not affect their egg or their sperm, and that tumor is not going to be passed on. I hope that makes sense. Again, leopards have scars, especially around their faces. Explain why the leopard cubs can be born with black coats but not with scars. So they showed you that there was a black panther and a normal one. Now, why can some of them be born with black coats but they won't be born with scars? And it's the same thing. What happens is the black coat has been a mutation or a new allele and a change in the DNA sequence, and we call that inheritable variation. Whereas the scars are caused by environmental conditions, only affect the cells, the somatic cells, the body cells. It does not affect the gametes, the sex cells, or the sperm and the egg. And because it doesn't affect those cells, it is not passed on to the offspring. Okay, so please read through this, open the presentation, make sure that you read through and understand. Okay, this is an excellent question. It is so easy, guys. It's just a story. Okay, so variation occurs due to the process of mutation in meiosis and sexual reproduction. So I think we're going to call it a day for here, and next time we start with mutations, meiosis and sexual reproduction. Alrighty, so thank you very much. I will also give you a little bit of SciPad work to complete, and then we'll take it from there. Okay guys, have a great day. Thanks.